I inherited the old family meadow on Willow Ridge a little over 2 years ago. 10 acres of rolling green and wildflowers, tucked behind a line of oaks that have been standing since before anyone here was born. My grandparents carved walking paths through it, taught me how to skip stones in the little creek that runs through the center. To them, that meadow wasn't just land, it was a heartbeat. When they passed, I promised myself I'd keep it the way they loved it. Untouched, free, alive. And for a while, that's exactly what I did. I built my workshop on the edge of the property, just a small barn with big sliding doors. I worked there alone, building props and mechanical rigs for studios in the city, enjoying the quiet. Every morning, I'd walk out with coffee in hand and listen to the meadow breathe, birds, crickets, the sound of wind bending tall grass. Then the letters started. The first was polite. Dear Mr. Caleb Johnson, the Willow Ridge HOA would like to propose a joint development project to benefit the community. I didn't even finish reading. Straight to the trash. 2 weeks later, another arrived, this one firmer. Mr. Johnson, it has been noted your parcel could be rezoned to increase revenue potential. Please attend the upcoming HOA meeting. I didn't go. Why would I? It was my land. Private. Untouched. That's when the calls started. Then the visits. HOA board members on my porch, all smiles and clipboards, talking about community improvements and shared prosperity. I told them no. Firmly. Repeatedly. And then, they stopped asking. It happened on a Thursday morning. I woke before sunrise to a sound I hadn't heard in years. Engines, rumbling and loud, carrying through the mist like a warning. I grabbed my boots and stepped outside. The air smelled like oil and wet grass. I rounded the bend in the dirt road, expecting maybe maintenance crews or surveyors. Instead, I saw floodlights. 40 of them, mounted on tall poles, illuminating my meadow like a construction site at midnight. Bulldozers crawled through the grass, chewing it into mud. Concrete mixers churned. A line of men in hard hats moved like ants, hammering stakes, unrolling blueprints, shouting over the roar of machines. My meadow was gone. Just like that. I charged down the hill, yelling, waving my arms, demanding to know who signed off on this. A foreman barely looked up from his clipboard and said, "Talk to the HOA, pal. We're on schedule. Luxury cabins, phase 1. Luxury cabins? My voice cracked. On my land? Not your land anymore. Easement agreement filed last month. HOA's got rights to develop. Call your lawyer." I stumbled back, heart pounding. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't agreed to a thing. By noon, foundations were poured. By sunset, I was standing in what used to be my grandmother's favorite field of asters, staring at the skeleton of a cabin where she once taught me to ride a bike. That night, I stormed into the HOA meeting uninvited. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A long table of board members turned to stare at me. And there she was, Rhonda Glass, president of the HOA, wrapped in pearls and power, smiling like a predator in a pantsuit. "Caleb," she purred, "so glad you could join us. We were just discussing how this development will elevate Willow Ridge." "You bulldozed my land," I said, my fists clenched. "You had no right." Rhonda folded her hands, voice calm as if explaining something to a stubborn child. "Oh, but we do. That meadow wasn't being utilized. The board approved a reclassification for community benefit. 40 cabins, premium rentals, all contributing to our shared future. You stole it." Her smile never faltered. "Progress is messy, dear. You'll thank us when you see the property values rise." I felt every pair of eyes in the room on me, waiting to see if I'd bow my head like so many others had before. But I didn't. I stormed out, slamming the door so hard the sound echoed down the sterile hallway. Comment where you are watching this video from, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. For weeks, I watched as my meadow transformed into something unrecognizable. Manicured sod rolled in from trucks. Imported plants arranged in neat, unnatural rows. Concrete pathways where deer once crossed at dawn. And the centerpiece, the HOA's brand new irrigation system, a network of pipes and sprinklers that cut straight through my remaining parcel, feeding every blade of that foreign grass. 40 shiny cabins stood in perfect formation by midsummer. Tourists arrived with suitcases and wine coolers, sipping cocktails on porches that had once overlooked wild goldenrod. Children ran across lawns that had been my family's hayfield. And every day, Rhonda Glass strutted the gravel lanes, HOA badge flashing in the sun, waving to guests like the queen of some kingdom she never built. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. Just watched. Until one evening, sitting on the old oak stump at the edge of the property, I noticed something. All those cabins, all that new grass, they weren't tied to any municipal water line. They were tied to my irrigation system. Every drop feeding those rentals flowed through valves buried in my soil. I felt the old anger rise. They thought they could steal my land and make me watch as they profited. They forgot one thing. I know every inch of that meadow. Every pipe. Every valve. Every hidden lever. I went back to my workshop, turned on the single hanging light, and pulled out the county records I'd been saving since my grandparents passed. I traced the irrigation lines with my finger, following them from the main pump under the oak tree to every cabin's sprinkler head. By midnight, the plan was clear. I didn't sleep that night. The blueprints stayed spread across my workbench, coffee rings staining the edges as the hours passed. I traced every line twice, every valve, every junction. By dawn, I knew exactly where to go. The irrigation system was my grandparents' design, simple, efficient, and completely independent. The HOA never bothered to check the details. They assumed it was theirs now. That was their first mistake. At 3:17 a.m. on a moonless Monday, I walked out under the oaks. The air was thick with summer humidity, and the cabins in the distance glowed faintly, porch lights winking in the dark. I knelt by the old pump box, brushed away leaves, and opened it with a creak that echoed like a secret breaking free. Inside, the main irrigation valves gleamed under my flashlight. I turned the wrench slowly, one valve after another, until the steady hum of pressurized water faded to silence. Then I capped them, tight, permanent caps that redirected the flow back into the wild drainage ditch where it belonged. The water that once kept their perfect sod alive was now soaking the lowlands, turning old deer trails into soft marsh. By the time the sun rose, I was back on my porch with a mug of coffee, watching birds cut across the morning sky. And then I waited. Day one. The sprinklers sputtered, spitting air. HOA groundskeepers shrugged, assuming a minor hiccup. Cabin owners didn't notice. Day 3. Brown patches appeared in the imported grass. A few ornamental hedges drooped under the heat. Guests began calling the HOA office. Rhonda Glass arrived in her pearl-white Escalade, pacing the main drive like a general at war. I watched her from my porch. She knocked on my door that evening, voice coated in honey but eyes sharp. Rhonda, Caleb, sweetheart, are you having trouble with your water line? We've noticed some irregularities. Me, sipping coffee, smiling, not that I've seen. Nature's unpredictable this time of year. Rhonda, tight smile. I'm sure it'll sort itself out. She left, but not before glancing back at me, suspicion written all over her face. By week 2, the meadow started fighting back. The once perfect lawns around the cabins turned brittle and brown, cracking under the summer sun. Native weeds sprang up, wild thistle, goldenrod, creeping vines, pushing through imported sod like nature's rebellion. Cabin owners filed complaints. Our kids can't play in the yard, everything's dead. We paid premium for this? Online reviews tanked. HOA maintenance crews brought in water trucks, but the soil wouldn't hold. I'd redirected too much. The ground turned to mud under the weight of heavy tires, swallowing them to their axles. And then the insects came. Mosquito swarms hatched in the redirected irrigation pools. Cabin guests fled inside, slapping at their arms, cursing. Every morning, I stood at my window with a calm I hadn't felt in months, watching the chaos unfold. Every evening, I sat on my porch as the sun set behind the dying cabins. It didn't take long for Rhonda to snap. One humid afternoon, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel and saw her marching up my driveway, HOA badge pinned to her blazer like a weapon. She didn't knock this time. She stormed onto the porch. Rhonda, enough games, Caleb. You've tampered with HOA property, and we will pursue damages. Me, leaning back in my chair, HOA property? Last I checked, those irrigation lines run through my land. Rhonda, the board approved that easement. Me, funny, I never signed it. Maybe your lawyer should have checked before you started building cabins. Her face reddened, her smile cracking. Rhonda, you think this little stunt makes you a hero? You're finished in this neighborhood. Me, calmly, no, Rhonda. I think it makes me free. She stared at me, jaw tight, then spun on her heels and stormed back to her SUV. But she couldn't fix it, not without buying new water rights, not without crossing legal lines she didn't have the stomach for. By week 3, the cabins looked abandoned. Grass waist high, vines crawling over railings, once shiny patios cracking under the heat. Guests canceled reservations. Investors pulled out. The HOA stopped sending their little violation slips to my door. For the first time in months, the air around my porch felt quiet. At sunset, I walked out to the edge of the old meadow. The cabins were still there, skeletons of someone else's greed, but nature was winning. Wildflowers pushed through what was left of the sod. Bees hummed. A heron waded through the shallow marsh that had formed where a perfectly trimmed lawn used to be. I knelt, touched the soil, and whispered to my grandparents' memory. It's yours again,